Hi, everyone. This is Jen. I want to thank you so much for joining me from, it appears to be all over the world. I am so grateful to have you here, and we will be starting momentarily. We still have a couple more minutes. I love seeing that there are people from all over the world, and as soon as I can see what happens with this screen, oh wait, there we go. All right, we're gonna go into slideshow. Let's see. Okay, all right, great. So we will start probably in another minute or two. I love that people are putting in the chat where you are calling in from. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Nothing excites me more than to be with people who share our passion for story. Shana Lloyd will be working with me. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Shana. If you have questions for me, please put them in the Q&A, and at the end of the class, I will answer them. And again, love that I'm seeing so many new names and so many names from all kinds of retreats and webinars and everything that I have attended. I love to see your names. I love to feel your energy and know that you are here. I want you to know I am so grateful. I'm so honored. I know time is valuable, and I look forward to sharing this new angle with you. So why don't we start now? It is time. So welcome, welcome. This is Jen Grisanti, and this is Story Therapy from Resistance to Freedom. So I want to start with this quote, art is confrontation. It widens the audience's reality, allowing them to glimpse life through a different window. This is by Rick Rubin, author of The Creative Act. If you have not read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. I love this quote because it helps us to understand the significance of developing your lens of story by understanding who you are and who your central character is. So let's see. Gratitude. So I am so grateful for all of you. I love feeling your energy from all over the world. I love seeing your comments in the chat. I will also send the chat around once the recording is available. I will send the chat and I will get to all of your questions at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A versus the chat, and we will go through them at the end. Who am I? So this is the question that I've been noticing more and more. It is what inspired this angle of story, is the idea of who am I? I'm seeing it in Oscar-nominated films. I'm seeing it explored in televisions that are brilliant and amazing on streaming and network. We are all on a journey of discovering the answer, and we are all evolving continuously with the question of who am I? So what we're going to go through in this webinar is understanding how to apply the idea of who am I to your story, which I think is going to help demystify this process. So who is your central character? This is pivotal to the success of your story. A note that I give a lot is I don't know who your central character is. And this is a note that many studio executives give to writers. This is a note that I feel very often when I'm watching streaming, network, and film. This is a note that I feel. I feel like I don't know who the central character is enough to emotionally engage in the story. And emotional engagement is your mission as a writer, is to emotionally engage your audience. So we're going to look at that through your character, and I'm going to give you some insight on how you can do that and things to think about. Who are you? So I could tell from people answering in the chat, we have people from all different angles who are writers in one way or another. So you are a TV or streaming writer, you're a feature writer, you could be a novelist, fiction or nonfiction, or a business owner. So a large part of the angles that I develop with story and the story systems that I develop come from my branding and creating my own business. So understanding story and branding is as pivotal to the writer as it is to the business owner and anyone who is creating content. So, from resistance to freedom, this is the new angle for this year. And this is something that I'm noticing more and more. And I'm with the stories that are making me feel emotionally engaged at the highest level. It is because I am feeling the resistance from the beginning. And when I feel the resistance, I identify with the central character. I empathize with the central character. It makes me lean in. So, with your stories, you want to think about what are you doing to create resistance from the start with your central character. So, with story, you're thinking about the unhealed wound. This is where all of story begins. So, whether we know what that unhealed wound is or not, we should feel that unhealed wound. So, all of story begins with the unhealed wound. And your central character has a shaded lens. So, with story, you want to think about the idea of like in meditation. In meditation, I don't know if you guys are into meditation. I love meditation. I love yoga. I've been doing yoga for over 30 years. I believe in the idea of cleansing and clearing some of the voices that you have going on, some of your limiting beliefs. Well, your character has this too. So when you're thinking about your character with the shaded lens, you're thinking about a character who has an unhealed wound. And the job of the pursuit of your story is to show us how your character is going to go from the unhealed wound through the pursuit to understanding the flaw that is holding them back from the dream and whether or not they are going to acknowledge that flaw by the end of the story. And this goes in life as well. So the dream is so important for you to have in the setup of your story. The dream gives us a sense of where the character is. It adds a level of humanity to your character. We all have dreams. And with the idea of resistance, we should get a sense of just how far your character is from the dream. And again, this will help us to identify. And another purpose of understanding the dream is setting up the internal and the external stakes. So if we understand just how far your character is from the dream, then it creates a rooting interest. We are all about watching the dream come true. Certainly, when you look at reality shows, you know what I can tell you what I love about watching reality shows like The Voice, like American Idol. I love seeing the dream happen in the moment. Well, that's what you're doing in story. You want, in your fictionalized story, you want us to feel the dream because the dream connects your audience. Connecting your audience. So, with connecting your audience, you want to look at things like, so we'll start with the resistance. You want to, and I'm going to give you some ideas of what are some great ways to show how your central character is in resistance. With connecting to your audience, you want to think of ways that you can make us lean in, ways that you can make us empathize with your central character at the beginning of your story. I know I see it very often where writers wait too long to connect their audience to their story. Two recent film and a television show that I've watched that deals directly with the idea of the unhealed wound is True Detective Night Country. That's on Max. If you haven't watched this, I highly recommend it. And Ferrari is another one that I just watched that I love, that also heavily goes into the idea of the unhealed wound and how we feel the resistance at the beginning of the story. So transform how you see story. Every year I look for an angle to help demystify the story process. I have been working in story for over 30 years. Aaron Spelling was my mentor for 12 of those years. And the idea of how story is continuously evolving is something that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with it from a former current programming executive point of view, in that everything I want to teach you is from where story is now. So because story is continuously evolving, it is your job as a writer to know what are the current shows that are working at a high level, what are the current films that are resonating at a high level, and how is story evolving. So we will go into that some more. Quote, I have lost touch with a couple of people I used to be. This quote is by Joan Didion. I love this quote so much because it shows you that we are all evolving. We are all changing who we are, and our journey to understanding who we are is so pivotal in our process of telling story, because our understanding of who we are is what connects us to our audience. Moving from resistance to freedom. Okay, so looking at my talk, the idea of resistance as it links to who am I leading into freedom. So when your story begins, we need to understand what is making your central character feel stuck. We will talk about different ways to do that. Now, the new angle with Who Am I really starts with your series trigger and dilemma or your inciting incident. Your character is starting to begin the debate of who are they as it links to their flaws, as well as to their new traits that they will need to take on to achieve the dream. So the pursuit in the middle of your story is that exploration of who am I? And then freedom is where your character is going in terms of the dream and understanding. Freedom is the clearing and the cleansing of the negative narrative, of the flaw, the healing of the flaw, of the healing of the wound. And this is something we all need to do in life as well as in story. And this is why story connects us so much, because when writers understand how to apply this to their life, then it becomes easier with understanding how to apply this to the stories that you are writing. So, who am I? This question made me think about the first two are who I am now. So, who I am now is a story career consultant, an author of 3 books, and a speaker. Who I was a 13-year writing instructor for Writers on the Verge at NBC and a former 12-year studio executive. My last job was vice president of current programming. So when I think about who I am versus who I was, I think about the idea of evolving in the life process, the idea of what do I identify with now? I identify with being a story career consultant and an author and speaker. I identify with the idea of healing. We're all healers. If you are a storyteller, you are a healer. I identify with the yogi lifestyle. That is a huge part of my life, in being a teacher and a guide. And who I was allows me the depth to go into who I am now in a deeper way. So, my arc from resistance to freedom, and I want to share this with you because I want you to start to think about your arc from resistance to freedom. I want you could think about this in the context of becoming a working writer. What is your arc in becoming a working writer right now? Like, I want you to be aware of, are you going through resistance with what it is to becoming a working writer? And can thinking about these points in your life help you understand what to go to with that? I'm making sure that we are, yes, okay. So resistance, hitting my sense of resistance. So in my story, I hit a wall in the corporate culture at the end of my studio executive career. I found that I was struggling with the idea of the corporate world. I was struggling with being burnt out. I was struggling with the rigidity that was involved, especially as it linked to story, especially as it linked to working with writers and having to adhere to certain guidelines of how story had to be, because I was coming from the studio executive point of view. The trigger and dilemma. So I was a 12-year studio executive, and my career abruptly and unexpectedly ended when a boundary was crossed and I reacted versus responded. So this was all a part of my journey of understanding and of moving from resistance to freedom. My flaws at that time included people pleasing, pride, ego. When you are climbing the corporate ladder, you tend to be in the survival mindset. You tend to let people pleasing and pride get in the way of who you are and what you want to explore. My control theory, which is another thing that I've added to the angle this year, was if I work all the time, I will prove my worth. So, how many of you can identify with the idea of corporate burnout, with the idea of maybe being a little rebellious against authority, with the idea of feeling like you have to work all the time in order to prove your worth? So when I look at the idea of who am I and flawed thinking, I think about when I was a studio executive, how that flawed thinking influenced things. Now, when I was a writing instructor for Writers on the Verge, that was the same time I opened my business. So that actually was a part of my moving into freedom. My new trait that I took on when I left the corporate world was more into authenticity and spirit, and recognizing story from the place of I want writers to have their real authentic voice come out in their stories. I don't want an agenda of what it has to be. I want to understand the full truth from writers of what they want it to be. And then I want to utilize the skills that I learned as a studio executive to help writers send that story out to the world in the best place possible. So that led me to freedom, which was starting my own business, Jen Grisanti Inc. So the freedom also included when I worked in Writers on the Verge, the value of wounds. So the value of wounds is what led to my 3 books, Storyline, TV Writing Toolkit, and Change Your Story, Change Your Life. These books sold due to my wounds of a long relationship that ended in a short marriage and represented the death of the fairy tale. That was a long, long time ago. I have since been in an amazing place, relationship wise, and I feel very grateful for that. And my second point of my story was my turning point with the end of a 12-year studio executive career, which led me into having to redefine. And the redefining is what led me to open Jen Grisanti Inc. in January of 2008. And that probably was one of the best things that could have possibly happened on my path. So I share this with you so that you can start to look at your wounds in a different way, so that you can start to see your wounds are what connect you to your audience. Since opening my business, I've had 112 pilots sold by the writers I've worked with. Over 150 writers have staffed, and writers I've worked with have sold several features. What is the path from resistance to freedom? So looking at this new angle and using it in a simplistic way to look at where you are with the story you're writing, to look at what is causing you to be stuck. And hopefully some of what we go through with this will give you some insight. Resistance. What is causing your central character's resistance when we enter the story? So part of what I would love for you guys to do from this point forward is start to, when you're watching streaming television and film, start to identify where is resistance coming from at the beginning of the story. Do we feel the flaw? Does it make us curious about the wound? So there are two directions right now that I'm seeing a lot of. It used to be that so many stories were starting with the wound in real time and then cutting to the present moment, which has tremendous value because it puts us in the heat of the moment with the wound. We feel for the character, but we're lately I'm seeing more and more films and shows go into the flaw first and wait on revealing the wound. They're using the flaw as a way to bring us in, as a way to make us lean in and want to understand more about the wound. So when you're looking at examples of resistance, you're looking at things like the character's life is a mess often when we enter the story due to their flaws, due to a void that they feel, often connected to a trigger event that happens before we enter the story that may split open that childhood wound. Another example of resistance, the character acts out due to the unhealed wound, and we feel a conflicting familial dynamic. So this is a huge story note, the idea of how many conflicted familial dynamics do you have in your concept? We all identify with what it is to be in a family, the good, the bad, the ugly of what this looks like. And when we see this in story, whether it's a procedural, a spy thriller, every sci-fi, every type of genre, it grounds us. It makes us feel connected when we identify with the conflicted familial dynamic. Trigger and dilemma. This is so important in terms of the weight of choosing the right trigger and dilemma. In film, it's more referred to as inciting incident. I like to refer to it as trigger and dilemma because I feel like it helps you to understand that moment more. Something is happening to your character that is pushing them into a compelling dilemma. And when the dilemma is not strong enough, that's when you're failing to emotionally engage your audience. So you want to make sure that both sides of the dilemma are compelling so that we feel the strength of the dilemma. Certainly with series, your series dilemma is pivotal to the success of your series. With your series dilemma, you want to think about how you're bookending that at the end of the pilot, and then you're linking that to the end of season one, and how that compelling dilemma is everything in terms of the engine of your story. So examples of strong dilemmas. Character is torn between a limiting belief and a desire for the dream. A character's belief or value conflicts with the external pursuit. We feel the weight of the stakes on both sides of the dilemma. So this is an excellent question for you to ask yourself when you're looking at the scripts that you are writing is, do I have a strong enough dilemma? Now, what I'm adding to this angle is, who am I? So as soon as we have the dilemma from your series setup or your inciting incident, we should start to feel the question, who am I? as it links to your central character. What is motivating the choices that your central character makes? Is it the flaw, the control thoughts, the negative narrative, or the fear? Flaw. So, as I mentioned, the flaw is the story of the wound. The flaw is so significant to the success of your story. I know that there are writers who are afraid of exploring the flaw in depth, and yet that fear is going to get in the way of your story succeeding at the level that it could. So with the flaw, I always love when writers, when you keep a journal, start thinking of all the people around you. We are all flawed. Our flaws are all ongoing. And start taking notes on people's flaws. Start looking at the flaw and looking at how is the flaw getting in the way of the dream. You may ask yourself, how is your flaw getting in the way of your dream? And can your awareness of this help you think about whether your flaw is linked to an unhealed wound? And would doing the emotional work help you to move past this? So with control thoughts, and I'll give an example of a show later on in this presentation. With control thoughts, you want to think of things like it's all good. So we've all heard people say it's all good, even when we know that they don't really believe that, or it isn't all good all the time. That's just the truth of the matter. Or it's always something. So you can look at the cynical point of view or the positive point of view, but think about your character in terms of how do they control their world? What is a thought process that you can reveal in your writing that gives us a sense of how they control the world? Because when we understand their unhealed wound, their flaw, and their control thought, this is how we get to know who your character is. It is often how we also get some glimpse and insight of who you are as a writer with what you are exploring with us. So a recent quote that I heard that I love that goes with the idea of control thoughts is beware the fury of the patient man. This will directly apply to a show that I'm going to explore in a little bit as I break down this arc so that you guys can see it. But the beware the fury of the patient man. So the patient man is suppressing that fury. So beware the fury of the patient man is ironic and it's truth. This is who people are. We have the light and the dark, and we want to feel this in your characters. Negative narrative examples: I am not enough, I am not worthy. So if you've taken my courses before, you know I explore this in depth with the show Mare of Easttown. This is an excellent show that gives you, we see Mare is stuck when we enter the story. We feel her resistance. We feel it in the series setup when her boss says, the viral video went out, how come we haven't found answers on Katie Bailey? We get a sense that something must have happened to Mare. And we learn in the season arc through by show 7, we learn what happened to Mare in her childhood wound with the death of her father that led to the negative narrative, I'm not enough and I'm not worthy. So when you know these things, about your character, then it informs choice. It informs choice moving forward with your character's pursuit. When you know that in episode 7, you're going to give us the full picture of the childhood wound, then you know that choice is going to be influenced by that negative narrative from your starting point through when you reveal what that is, as your character is becoming more cognizant of that. Biggest fear, what if the negative narrative is true? So this is something that I find when writers understand how to integrate the biggest fear, what a massive difference it makes in us connecting to the character and the concept. Fear is something that we all have. We all have a biggest fear of being judged, being rejected, being humiliated. And when we feel that in your character, being unloved, being unlovable, like when we being not worthy, these are things that everybody relates and connects with. So when you explore these in your character, it helps us to understand who they are. Freedom. Does the character acknowledge the flaw and make a choice that leads to accomplishing the goal? So that's where freedom comes from. Freedom comes from the character acknowledging the flaw. Now, in television, the flaw is ongoing. That's what creates your engine of story, just as in life, the flaw is ongoing. But the awareness of the flaw is the epiphany that the character hits in the all is lost moment when they're hitting rock bottom and as far away from the goal as possible. They begin to see how the flaw is holding them back. And the acknowledgement of the flaw is what brings them to freedom. So when you're developing your concept, I want you to think about 4 questions. How do you show your character's resistance in your opening? So you always want to think about show versus tell. So we should feel what that resistance is. For example, in Succession, we feel Kendall's resistance. We feel when Kendall goes into that meeting at the beginning with all ego and the words he uses that the other guy makes fun of and humiliates him. We feel that resistance. We feel where Kendall is at that point in his life, and we immediately sense within the conflicted familial dynamic with his father, Logan, where that is coming from. I know I see 2 participants raised their hand. I think we may have to wait until the questions at the end. Although,
and I'm trying to get people to put their questions in the chat.
okay, that would be great. Thank you, Shayna. Thank you. Thank you. So please hold on to that question. Please put that in the chat as Shayna mentioned. That would be great. I will definitely address it when we get to the Q&A. Question number 2, do you have a compelling trigger and dilemma inciting incident? So you want to look at your dilemma. Does your dilemma create conflict in a way that we feel both sides? An example I loved was from Sleeper Cell, old show that I know I've mentioned a few times in my past courses, that where we feel the central conflict within the series dilemma of faith versus the mission. So that is how you start to think about, is my dilemma strong enough? If your dilemma is not strong enough in your series, then it's not going to work. The concept is not going to work at the level that it could. Question number 3, how do we feel your central character debating, who am I? So that is the new thing that I want you to, if you haven't integrated that into your thought process with developing story, I encourage you to start utilizing that in your thought process. And I encourage you to start being aware of it. When you're watching Oscar nominated films, you will be shocked this year in particular at how many times the phrase who a person is comes up. So this is an excellent way for us to understand who your character is. And as I said, it adds a sense of humanity because it is a question everyone is continuously debating in their life. Question number 4, does your central character do the emotional work and gain freedom by acknowledging the flaw? So looking at those 4 questions is how I hope it will help you with your process where you're stuck with your stories. So now here is an example that I'm going to give you with the show Beef, the Emmy Award and Golden Globe Award winning show Beef on Netflix. When we look at resistance, when we start Beef, Danny gets frustrated at the cashier when he realizes that he doesn't have a receipt to make a return. So we feel Danny seething from the start. First, because he's having to wait in a long line. And then when he gets up there and doesn't have what he needs to make the return, we feel his anger just seething, and we feel his resistance when he goes to the car and how upset he gets. Then you have the trigger and dilemma with the road rage incident when Danny backs up and almost hits Amy. Amy leans on her horn and flips him off, leading Danny to react with fury. So again, something like how amazing and brilliant for the writer to come up with this concept, because you have universal feeling of so many people who've been through road rage, and this is kind of their way to see that through, which is a great thing to explore. The flaws, we see Danny and Amy's flaws are their rage and anger. So the interesting thing is you have 2 characters who their flaws are essentially the same, but they're coming from different places. So what they do in the setup of Beef that is brilliant is they give us a sense of the why pretty quickly so that we understand Danny's why for the fury versus Amy's why as it links to what is going on in their life at that time. Danny's control theory. Danny's control theory involves thinking you must always smile for the world, even when you don't feel like it. So I loved how he talked about this, and then immediately his parents call and he's putting on a smile. So we see that that is his way of suppressing his flaw through talking about the control theory. The idea of who am I? Danny finds the receipt in the all is lost sequence. So then the question is, will he still pursue the road rage incident? Now, we know that in the pilot arc, he's looking to find who the driver was, and he finds out that where the car is, but then the question is of who was driving the car. And Danny gets the freedom of the answer with who was driving the car when he discovers that Amy was in fact driving the car, not her husband, as Danny thought it was a male driving the car that caused the road rage incident. And this sheds a whole new light on this concept. So this is definitely a concept that goes outside the box, and you have people who love this show, and you have people who don't respond to it as in the same way because of the negativity. So it's a very, I love what is explored in this. So this brings me to the point of, do you want to learn more? I'm giving you, in this webinar, I'm giving you an example of what we will be doing for the 6-week story therapy teleseminar From Resistance to Freedom. This starts on March 5th and goes through April 16th at 7 p.m. Pacific time online. And the curriculum. So I created the curriculum for Writers on the Verge at NBC. And I create the curriculum for all of my courses, which is essentially giving writers a sense of what is it to be in a writing fellowship. So I recognized that there were thousands of writers who didn't get into the writing fellowships. And I went to NBC and I told them that I wanted to start creating courses that give writers the same experience of being in a fellowship. Story therapy From Resistance to Freedom. So the story modules are all pre-recorded. So upon purchase, you will immediately receive the story instruction. You will receive my story instruction system. You'll receive handouts, formulas, breakdowns, 8 shows, and 1 film. So the shows that I have this year, which you can see on my website, are Tiny Beautiful Things, The Diplomat, Slow Horses, Beef, Shrinking, Daisy and the Six, Bad Sisters, and Wednesday. The film is Past Lives. I love everything that comes out of these. So I did breakdowns for all of these because I wanted to teach story from a place that was working at a very high level. So you will receive breakdowns for all of these 6-week live online classes. We will meet on Tuesday nights starting March 5th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. You will receive a recording of the call. So I know we have people from all over the world. Please know if your time zone doesn't sync that you will receive recordings of everything. I have had people, participate where they were rotating in from London, and I think it was like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning at the time of it, and they made it work. So you have to think about whether you want to make it work in terms of the live experience or whether you want to get the recording. Opportunity to pitch. There is an opportunity to pitch for level 1 each week. I will announce who the guest speaker is the following week, and the first people who sign up will have the opportunity. Level 2, you will get to choose a guest speaker. Level 3, you will also get to choose a guest speaker. I am beyond thrilled with the guest speakers that I have this year. They are leading experts in the business. First, we have Brandon Margolis and Brandon Saunier. Now, this is not in order that they will be speaking. I don't have them in any order. Also, when I give their credits, please know that many of them have many more credits, but I'm just giving you they're the most recent or the biggest credits. So with Brandon and Brandon, they have Bad Boys, LA's Finest, SWAT, and The Blacklist. They are creator showrunners. They came from Writers on the Verge, so we are very, very proud of them. Javier Grigio Markswatch. He is an executive producer. His show includes The Witcher, The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, Lost, The 100, and Medium. I covered Medium at the studio. Javier is amazing. Matthew Salzberg is an executive producer. He was on Almost Friends, Hitting, Wilderness, Weeds, and Entourage. Mark Goffman, executive producer. He was on Irrational, Umbrella Academy, Bull, Sleepy Hollow, Limitless, and White Collar. His wife, Lindsay Goffman, is the founder of Gratitude Productions. She produced The Company You Keep, and she championed The Good Doctor. Jim Adler is a co-executive producer who was on The Good Doctor, MacGyver, and Castle. And Audrey Knox is a literary manager at Cartel Entertainment. Her clients have staffed on Single Drunk Female, Ginny and Georgia, and P-Valley. So I'm very, very excited to have this group this year. The bonuses included in the launch process is you will get a breakdown for the setup of Anatomy of a Fall, which is one of the brilliant Oscar-nominated films that I love, love, love. You will get a 2024 story worksheet. So the story worksheet, I evolve every year as it links to the angle that I am exploring, so that you will receive the 2024 story worksheet that will help you with your script, the story therapy handout, which will give you all of the foundational points for my past story therapy courses. So that is what's included. When you make the purchase, this is the first thing you'll get will be the tour of the story modules. So when you sign up, you will receive an email that will give you login information. Keep this email because it will give you continuous access to the course for 1 year, to the pre-recorded story modules. They are a huge part of the course. I worked on these story modules for over 6 months. Again, the breakdowns are invaluable and will help you understand how to apply it to your process. Now I'm going to go into the different levels. Level 1, you will receive a 20-minute concept session, a pre-recorded story instruction with the modules, 6 live online classes with recordings, an opportunity to pitch, and the private Facebook community. Level 2, I only have 18 spots. You'll receive 1 one-on-one consult, rotate in live class 1 time for notes. You'll be able to choose the guest speaker. You'll get a 30-minute concept session. So you'll get the review of your script 2 times with the live class and the one-on-one, and then a 30-minute brainstorming concept session, a pre-recorded story instruction modules, and the 6 live online classes with recording, plus the private Facebook community. Level 3, I only have 4 spots at level 3. With level 3, you will get the 4 coaching consults. You will get to rotate into the live class 3 times. So this is like Writers on the Verge in the way that you'll get to rotate in. You will not only receive notes from me, you'll receive notes from the class. You'll get to choose the guest speaker. You'll get the pre-recorded story instructions. You'll get 6 live online classes. you'll get the private Facebook community. So would it be worth doing the work to find your purpose with your writing? Would it be worth having story instructions, breakdowns, and clips to help you get there? Would it be worth having a guide, a community, and guest speakers who are where you want to be on your journey? So Shayna, you can put in the link into the chat. This is, so level 1 is $397, regularly $697. Level 2 is $997, regularly $1875. Level 3 is $3,297, regularly $3,997. So these are the rates for, and here is the link, which is www.jengrisanti.com/live offer. So that gives you a sense. Again, the webinar this webinar was just giving you a small glimpse of what you will experience with the course and the shows that we will cover, the film that we will cover, the live classes, and the one-on-one feedback. And we are going, and so if you need to contact me, my website is jengrisanti.com. My email is jen@jengrisanti.com. And now we are going to go into the Q&A, and I will stop the share. Okay, great. All right, so Q&A, we'll start. Let's see, we'll start with Tony Holm. Let's see, Tony, hi Jen, I put too much into my script. In my scripts, the reviewer says, I believe this is based on my career in publishing, even had a screen analyst say to split my idea into a half-hour TV and a feature. Not sure how to handle these remarks. Help. I love that, Tony. Thank you so much for your question. I think there are, I would say, a note that's given so often is understanding what is the best format for your story, whether it's a feature, whether it's a half hour, and how to do this. So I think it all comes down to your concept and understanding what platform, whether it's a feature, whether it's a half hour, whether it's an hour, is going to be the best way for you to explore your concept. I don't know if that answered that, but I hope that helps to give you some insight. Grace, let's see, when you are working in the business and you want to be a TV writer, do you suggest working your way up from the bottom or just get a higher job if you can? Well, there's a value in working your way up from the bottom. And the value is that people love working with people they like. So when you are present and people are aware of who you are, then when opportunity comes, then you have a stronger chance than if you are from the outside going in. So yes, there is a tremendous value with climbing your way up and starting at the bottom. I think we are at a time where the voice is hitting in a big way. So I think obviously if you have a script that hits it out of the ballpark and you have an agent and a manager who can get you there, there are writers who can skip starting at the bottom inside the system and get placed. It's just much harder. And it all comes down if you have that script that can get you to that outcome. Jerome, I wrote a 30-page pilot script and I hinted at the flaw in the beginning, but I feel like I don't want to reveal the full flaw until later in the series. Is that okay? we should understand what the dominant flaw is by the end of Act 1. And we should have a very clear sense of what that flaw is. Holding off on the wound is okay. Holding off on the wound, definitely, if you're threading it through, that works. But I would not hold back on the flaw. Anonymous attendee, can you talk more about how control thoughts conflict with the flaw? An example, please. So exactly like the quote I gave you, and like Danny in Beef, in the idea of feeling, we see that Danny has fury in the beginning. We feel the rage. Then we hear his thought process of, I'm so tired of always having to put a smile on your face and thinking this is what the world has to see. And then his parents call and he puts a smile on his face. So we see the mask that he puts on. So that is the example of that. Samuel, is there a community of writers, like a closed WhatsApp group to join for easy communication? Or can you think towards this ahead? I have a private Facebook community that is a part of every event that I do. I'm sure that there are writer groups everywhere. So I'm sure that all you would have to do is do some research and Google that and see if there is an open group on WhatsApp that you can connect with. LinkedIn has a huge number, as does Facebook, of writer groups. Amanda Graham, thanks for this, Jen. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it. My question is, I'm helping 2 writers who are pitching their show next month. The pitch is 3 to 4 minutes long. Then there's 15 minutes of questions afterwards. How much of the MC's inner journey should they talk about in the initial pitch? Well, the inner journey is the story. So but I think in a short pitch, you have to balance the internal journey and the external plot. So it's very important with the internal journey. I always tell, like, when you're starting with the log line, we should feel with the adjective of the central character. The adjective should describe the void. And then the goal should feel like a step toward filling that void. So same with the pitch, short pitch. We should have a sense of what is causing the resistance, void, the character to be stuck, and how the external plot will allow them to pursue that. So I would think about balancing that within the context of the concept. Bruno, I need a deep definition of what you call resistance. Resistance is everything that I've said. When I go into the 8 breakdowns in my course, I give you a sense of resistance for the central character in each of those shows, as well as in the film Past Lives. So I gave you an example of resistance with Danny when we entered the story with Beef. Ian, you mentioned central character, but what about multiple character collectives? Do they all have a flaw? That's an excellent question. I am noticing more and more that writers with ensemble casts, which you have to keep in mind, even when you have an ensemble cast, you have one worldview that is driving your A story. So you are going into the concept through that worldview. However, I am noticing more and more. We just finished watching The Tourist, an Australian show where many of the characters, they explored the flaws and the wound, and it is an ensemble, even though it's being driven by a main worldview. Yes, and there's a value when you do that. So I do encourage you to think of it. I think when you're developing character, period, you always want to think about the things that I mentioned in terms of what's making them resist, what is their earlier wound, what is their flaw, how do they control the world. It helps you to develop the characters. Now, with your central character, we should know the most about your central character. Can you explain more about what you mean by both sides of the dilemma? Yes. So when you think about dilemma is when you are caught between a rock and a hard place. In Beef, he can pursue the road rage and see it through, or he can stop himself and not react to what happened. So if he stops himself and doesn't react, then he maybe won't feel like he gets the justice that he does if he thinks he'll go after it. So he is stuck between knowing what is the best direction for him. Ashley, what are some ways to show the protagonist questioning who they are? Oh, shoot, let's see. Show questioning who they are in a way that's more subtle than simply asking it. If you start to be aware of this from this point forward, you are going to see how creative writers get with the exploration of this question. Start watching, like I noticed it in Maestro, I noticed it in Ferrari, I noticed it certainly in that show I just watched, The Tourist. I noticed it in the show I just finished with True Detective Night Country. So I think like when you're cognizant of it, you're now going to start to see it more. John, question for the end. If you have a quartet, a quintet, a sextet of characters in your world, how do you delegate flaws if you are starting with the central character? So fantastic question. You want to think about how does the flaw inform the plot? So if you're having a wider range of characters, so example, I mentioned with The Tourist that's on Netflix, if I remember correctly, that that you want to look at how they develop the ensemble cast, because we are with that group of quirky characters and they do such a brilliant job with making the characters different and making us feel flaws. But with your central character, we should know the most about their wound and we should feel their flaw as it gets in the way of the dream at a deeper level than we feel with the other characters. Let's see, Jackie, I have a schedule conflict with 3 of the class dates. Will a recording be available for each week? Yes, a recording will be available for after every class, the recording goes out and then you have that recording. Or will the 6-week, I only offer the 6-week class once a year with the 6-week teleseminar. John, why do you want to present? Why do you want to present how to write drama? I'm not sure of that question, John. Sorry about that. Anonymous attendee, do you think when developing a feature film story for a younger audience, family entertainment, but young central character age 12, possibly that the central character's wound, the why should be revealed early? Yeah, I mean, there is a value I've seen with younger characters that obviously you're not going back when you have a 12 or a 14-year-old lead. Often we're feeling the wound happen in the present story, or we're getting a sense of the earlier wound. When you look at Wednesday as one of the shows that I break down, you have a younger lead where we feel the wound with her mother from the start. So I do think there's a value in that. Are the classes interactive? Elaine, yes. So the value in, something I did mention, I did mention, everyone can give notes. So my whole goal with the course is to help you guys understand what it is to be a working writer. And what it is to be a working writer is you have to know how to give notes. And how you can be interactive is we have a private Facebook community. You can also give notes every week. You have an opportunity to directly give notes to the writer. And then with the pitching, we will hear the guest speaker interact with the 5 writers who are pitching each week. Let's see, how do you define the levels we're part of? So that you'll see on the sales page, the breakdown of the levels. So that will help you with that in the link. Let's see, does it matter when the freedom point of the story occurs? Have one script where it occurs at the end of Act 2 and leads to enlightenment and reaching her dream. In my other script, she faces her flaw in Act 1, and the rest of the story is her trying to keep her flaw from hindering her pursuit of her dream. So that's common. So freedom typically happens with the resolution. However, the character in film often becomes first aware of the flaw in your stunning surprise at the end of Act 1. And then in the pursuit in Act 2, they're going back and forth between the new trait they need to take on in order to achieve the goal versus the flawed thinking. So they're going back and forth. So I have never read a script where I felt the freedom fully happen. Well, at the end of Act 2, you still want your all is lost moment where you feel like your central character is as far away from achieving the goal before achieving the goal at the top of Act 3. So the freedom probably in your story probably really comes at the top of Act 3. So you typically want to think of your resolution moment being where we fully get to feel the freedom. Amber, from your experience, what profile of student is best suited for each level? I have had newer writers jump in and do level 3. It is up to you. I have had advanced writers do level 3. I've had working writers do levels 2 or 3. So I think it all depends on the comfort zone of the writer. If you are ready to jump in, like in the writing programs, if your script is selected, you are thrown in there and you're jumping in. So this is an opportunity for writers to move beyond their fears and jump in if that's something you think you're ready to do. Jeffrey, I love this story therapy. How much freedom do you address in the pilot? Well, again, like when we're talking about freedom, you're looking at how at the end of the pilot, the character is one step toward the season 1 arc. So in Beef, he knows who Amy is by the end of the pilot. So he feels freedom and understanding that it wasn't her husband driving the car. It wasn't a male, it was a female. Now the question is, what is he going to do with that? So that is an ongoing thing. So you could have freedom in a limited series or ongoing series, not fully happen till the end of the season arc, but having a step toward that freedom in the pilot arc. Josh, my question was due to the popularity of having the phrase, "Who am I?" in so many projects these days. Is that becoming a cliche? It was even in the Super Bowl commercial with Anthony Hopkins. It is a lot. It is out there right now. There is no doubt about it. It is out there. The idea of who are you, but the truth of the matter is who you are as a writer, as well as who your central character is what is going to sell the concept. Do I think that there are creative ways to deal with this? Yes. And I think people are finding creative ways to do it. So we have time for a few more questions. Let's see, Lynn, can you explain more about rotate in 1 week for notes. So yes, that means you turn your script or your concept in the Saturday before the Tuesday class. I will give you written notes before the class, and then during the class, when that level rotates in for 1 week, you'll get the notes live during the class, and you'll also get the opportunity to have notes from everyone in the class who chooses to give you notes. Let's see. Hi, many thanks for the webinar. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Could we get you'll get there will be a recording, not the PowerPoint. Melinda, this has been very helpful. I must run to a 1 o'clock Zoom board, colleagues, and thank you so much, Melinda. I'm grateful. Tony, thank you. Do you recommend having a copyright of your script? Yes. Register your script, register. All right, guys, only because we are at 11:15, I'm going to stop this for now. So any questions? The class is offered once a year. Jackie, I can answer that real quickly. Any additional questions, feel free to email me. I want to thank you all so much for your time and your energy. I want to thank you for your questions and your participation. You have my link. I want to encourage you to understand resistance in your own life and understanding how you can move through your arc to freedom by doing the work. I would love for you to join us for the Story Therapy from Resistance to Freedom 6 weeks talent seminar starting March 5th. Again, thank you so much. Thank you. I love that heart. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Shana. Thank you, Shana, so much. So grateful. So I hope that you got a glimpse and that you have a stronger understanding of how to see your story and how to move your story. Have a fabulous rest of your day or evening, depending on when you are calling from. And again, thank you so much for your participation. Bye. Bye, Shana. Bye, everyone.